Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another OBGG or OGG Overberg Geoscientists Group presentation. This morning, it's our pleasure to welcome and introduce Lara Sciscio, and I believe that's how her name is pronounced. Lara is currently in Switzerland, and I guess she'll tell us a bit about what she's doing there on a postdoc. She's a Zimbabwean girl and has spent much of her life in and around Southern Africa, living between Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Botswana. She came to South Africa in 2005 to study at Rhodes University, where she obtained an MSc looking at Miocene-Pliocene sites along the Western Cape Coast, so young rocks. In 2016, she obtained a PhD from the University of Cape Town under the guidance of Amis Bordi and Michel de Kock. Her research to date has focused on understanding the Triassic-Jurassic transition, and for people who don't know, that's sort of around about 200 million years ago in Southern Africa. Recently, Lara won a postdoc fellowship to Switzerland, and she's at the Jurassica Museum. Now she gets to use her love of ichnology, the study of trace fossils, to focus on the largest collection of late Jurassic dinosaur tracks in Europe. So thanks, Lara. We're really looking forward to your talk, and we look forward to the discussion afterwards as well. Over to you.
Cool. Thank you very much, John. Okay, so hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. So today's talk is a little bit narrower in scope than was advertised. I am going to be reviewing about 120 years of paleontology in Zimbabwe, but we're going to be limiting it to the Kruger Age Basins because that's what I'm particularly interested in. So without further ado, there we go. So 2021 marks, as I said, 120 years since the first published works of fossils in Zimbabwe. That first publication was made by Arthur John Charles Molyneux, who you see on the right-hand side of your screen. And he discusses some fossils that were collected from the Sengwe district. So the Sengwe now comprises of the Lesulu, Busi, and Sengwe cold localities. And Tim Roderick had to point that out to me. I was a little bit confused. But that same year in 1901, he also gave a lecture in Bulawayo, my hometown, where he described 16 fossil localities that he'd found, and he presented some of the material that had been found from those fossil localities, which range from plants to bivalves to some fossil fish that he'd discovered. And actually, Molyneux had been looking at fossils and collecting fossils since as early as 1895, where he collected some bivalves and plant fossils from Karoo sediments. And these are now recognized as sort of the first recorded fossils found in Zimbabwe. So even though the first publication was probably in 1901, Molyneux had been collecting since the late 1890s. Unfortunately, vertebrates or dinosaur bone fossils that I think most people associate with Zimbabwe nowadays were not found until about 1913, around about there. And even in the Mozambique Basin, not until the late 1960s. But Molyneux, despite all the paleo that I'm going to be talking about throughout the presentation, which he's been instrumental in finding and promoting, he wasn't actually a paleontologist, he was a geologist. And his main task was the investigation of the coal fields in the Limpopo and Zambezi valleys. So he did several traverses, and he really examined outcrops in a lot of these remote places at that time, carried out a lot of the diamond drilling and shaft sinking, and was sort of involved in transporting steam engines from Bulawayo and drill rigs from Bulawayo all the way up north and south by, at that time, ox wagon. So he was really sort of instrumental in developing and pioneering exploration in these valleys. And his work on those coal-bearing successions in the Limpopo and Zambezi valleys really helped establish their broader equivalence with the Karoo system of South Africa on the basis of going back again to the fossils that he found. And actually, I think this quote is quite revealing of the type of personality or person that Molyneux was. So while risking his own life, he threw away most of his kit on one of his expeditions, but he retained some of the fossils that he'd found. And I think it really underpins, that was taken from his obituary, unfortunately, but it really underpins the type of personality and the dedication that he had, and the forward thinking that he saw in the relevance and importance of fossils at that time. And a lot of the traverses that he did were done on foot or alone in small teams. And it allowed him to truly explore a lot of the basins that he was tasked with mapping out. And so much so that even in the mid-1940s, Alex du Toit, the fantastic Alex du Toit, recognized and praised, I would say, the mapping that Molyneux had done and the traverses that Molyneux had done in the Zambezi Valley and in the Limpopo Valley. So much so that he mentioned in 45 that even after 35 years, Molyneux's work was still some of the prime sources of published information on these areas. So Molyneux really underpins a lot of the paleontological work, published paleontological work in Zimbabwe. And since Molyneux, there have been, since Molyneux's efforts and the beginning of paleo research, published paleo research in Zimbabwe, there's been a steady flow of paleontological and sedimentological research in Zimbabwe. And this is just kind of I just kind of grabbed a whole bunch of publications that I thought might be relevant and plugged them in here just to show you the diversity of what people have worked on and how long they've been working in Zimbabwe on the Crew Age basins, their sedimentology and their paleontology. And of course, this has been influenced by several people. This is not all of them. These are just a few that I personally felt very touched by reading their literature or having interacted with. And they are geologists and paleontologists that have kind of helped establish, develop, and curate the legacy of Zimbabwe's paleontology. So to name a few, I'm just going to run through them very quickly. Top left, we have Alex McGregor, who was, I think more people know him from the igneous perspective, but he was interested in fossil hunting from a young age. He was a geologist, but he was appointed as a curator of what was then the Rhodesian Museum, is now the National History Museum of Zimbabwe in Bulawayo, and he even produced a few papers on Crew rocks in and around Bulawayo. Then we have Professor Jeffrey Bond. I think Prof. Bond is inside and outside of Zimbabwe, really the accepted authority on all things Karoo. He was also the former head of, or helped establish the Department of Geology at the University of Zimbabwe, and just instrumental in a lot of the sedimentological and paleontological work coming out of Zimbabwe. And then finally on the bottom left, we have Dr. Mike Rath, who some of the people from the Evolutionary Studies Institute will know and recognized. He's a graduate of my alma mater, and he was the former director of museums and monuments in what was then Rhodesia and now Zimbabwe. And then also he worked at what was then the BPI, now the Evolutionary Studies Institute at Wits. And then on the right-hand side, we have all the people I've been fortunate enough and really lucky enough to get to work and get to chat with and discuss nitty-gritty of SEDS and Paleo and Zim, ranging from Darlington to Tim, who I've been so fortunate to work with in the field, to Ali, who I've had several email communications, mainly surrounding all the wonderful post-crew dinosaur track sites. And then finally, Mike Sonder, who's the curator of paleontology at the National History Museum in Bulawayo. And these are a few of the cherry-picked people that I've enjoyed reading their papers and getting to understand and get to grips with some of Zim's paleo history, and really have been instrumental in developing it. Okay, so without further ado, that was a bit of a build-up to now we run through a highlight reel of Zim paleo, and we can jump into the Crew Age basins. So on the left of your screen, we have an image of all the Crew Age basins stemming off of the main Crew Basin in Southern Africa. And then on right, we have Zimbabwe with several of its Crew Age basins. And these have been formed by extensional or transtensional stresses, and they host Karoo Age sedimentary successions. So I keep using the term Karoo, and that has been extrapolated from the main Karoo Basin to describe all the sedimentary infill of all the other basins of a similar age across Gondwana and in Southern Africa, basically. So Zimbabwe's Karoo Age basins are several of which are quite well known for their fossil or economic potential. And across all of these Karoo Age basins, in addition to the Archean and post-Kuru and Cenozoic fossiliferous material. We only currently have on the ground 2 Zimbabwean paleos in Darlington, Molyneux, and Mike Sondo. So they have a lot of work for the 390,000 square kilometers of surface area that could be fossiliferous. So a mammoth task. Okay, so we have all the several Kuru Age basins I mentioned in the previous slide. Within them, we have Kuru Age sedimentary rocks that range from the late Carboniferous to the early Jurassic. And like in much of South Africa, the sedimentation in these Kuru Age basins was terminated by the outpouring of the Kuru basalts, so the Drakensberg group. In Zim, it's known as either the Thule basalts or the Batoka basalts, and they don't occur ubiquitously in all basins, but we do have it, and it caps off sedimentation in the Kuru Age basins in Zimbabwe. There's sedimentary successions that infill these basins can then be subdivided into the lower Kuru group, which covers sort of everything from the upper Carboniferous to the early Triassic, plus minus, and the upper Kuru group, which is somewhere from the middle Triassic to the earliest Jurassic in age. And the takeaway message I wanted to provide from the slide as we move forward and discuss the fossils occurring in all these sequences is that the lower Kuru group corresponds roughly to the main Kuru basins, Dwaika, Eka, and at least part of the lower Beaufort groups. And the upper Kuru group corresponds approximately to the upper Beaufort, Stormberg, and Drakensberg groups. So in general, we can have some correlative with the main Kuru basin so that everyone can kind of follow where we are going through in the stratigraphy. Okay, so to kick off, we're diving into the lower Kuru group. So we're starting with the oldest first. And as I said, it's considered the equivalent of the main Kuru basins, Dwaika, Eka, and Beaufort groups. We have fossiliferous lower Kuru group outcropping in Wangi, Binge, Gokwe, Spungwe areas in the north. And these host plants, insects, fish, mollusks, and therapsids. And then we also have exposures of lower Kuru group in the Limpopo and Nwenetse areas in the south, which bear a lot of plant fossils, and it's more linked to coal production. So on the right-hand side, I've got a rough breakdown of the different formations that occur within the lower Kuru group. So we're going to dive into the Dwaika series, which is roughly the Dwaika group equivalent in South Africa, again, glacially influenced deposits. We're then going to look into the Wange and Sandstone formation and the coal measures that are approximate Eka equivalents, well documented in Zimbabwe, and of course, because of its coal potential, which is by far the most major economic deposit contained in these units. And then finally, we're going to climb into the Beaufort equivalent, which is known as the Maduma-Bisa mudstone formation, and look at some of the therapsids and gastropods that we find in that formation. Right, so start off this fossil heritage journey, we have to start out with the oldest unit in the lower Kuru group, the Dwaika series. And we also have to then link back to Molyneux again, because he didn't find this material, but he first described rocks in the Mid-Zambezi Basin region and referred to them as Dwaika depositions, so recognize the link with the main Kuru basin. One of the most significant fossils to come from Zimbabwe's Dwaika series is a wing of a proto-orthopteran, which was recovered from a borehole core drilled through the Dwaika series, and it was found in the varvites towards the top of this core. Now this, I can never get the name right, so I'm just going to call it an orthopteran, is considered late Carboniferous to lower Permian in age, and it so far, even through the revision by Getsema in 2002, makes it probably the oldest insect in Southern Africa and in the Southern Hemisphere. So we kick off with a punchy first recorded and described representative of the Proteopteria from the Dwaika series in the lower Kuru group of Zimbabwe. Just so you know, on the top left-hand side of the screen, we have map of Zim and some of the fossil localities, and I've tried to link up where we are in the sequence. So because we're going to jump around a little bit through the fossil occurrences, you can follow where we are in the stratigraphy. The second highlight from the Lower Kuru group that I've cherry-picked is in the units overlying the Dwaika series, so the Eka group equivalents. And this is the second or first, whichever way you want to look at it, important aspect of fossil discovery in Zimbabwe and in the Lower Kuru group. And these are plant fossils that were first recorded again by Molyneux in 1901. They're representatives of the Glossopteris coal floras, and really the reason I had to put these in because not everyone would associate coal with something particularly paleontological heritage, but their importance is really twofold. They represent a direct way to correlate Zimbabwe with their equivalents in the main Kuru basin of South Africa. And then secondly, their discovery comes off the back of a lot of exploration that had occurred in the Limpopo and Zambezi valleys since the late 1890s, where they were searching for the economic potential of these basins. And in finding the Glossopteris coal floras, Zimbabwe is actually, after South Africa, the most well-endowed Southern African country with respect to its coal reserves. And these are a result of these Glossopteris coal floras that Molyneux first described and recognized in the late 1890s, early 1900s. Not to be outdone, though, I did sneakily put in some of the other fossils that have been found from the coal, the Eka equivalent in Zim, and this is a wing, an insect wing. So there are insect remains that have been described from this Eka equivalent. There have also been several fish that have been described from this Eka equivalent. So it builds a broader paleo-environmental picture. And now one step above the coal measures, exiting out of the Eka equivalent and into the overlying Lower Beaufort group equivalent, the Maduma-Bisa mudstone formation, we have a diversity of Dynacaphalians. These are widely distributed throughout Pangaea, and main Kuru basin Beaufort group paleos, I guess, are more interested in the Dynacaphalians from Zimbabwe, and several have been found near Hwange in the northwest, and they're shared. Several of them are shared with the South African main Kuru basin, and they represent, or they're representatives of the I'm sorry, I apologize for botching this up in advance. The Tphenocephalus assemblage zone. Tphenocephalus? Someone help me at the end. This assemblage zone is the second oldest tetrapod biozone of the Beaufort group. It's approximately mid-Permian in age. And it is hoped that the relatively diverse Dynacaphalian material that we have in Zimbabwe could help to subdivide the Maduma-Bisa mudstone formation, which is sort of a very lithologically homogeneous unit, and also provide some sort of constraining ages on that formation, because it's still quite undifferentiated. And work by Darlington Muniqua, his master's thesis dealt with the Dynacaphalians from the Hwange area, and it was his hope to subdivide the formation using these Dynacaphalians, as is done in the main Kuru basin, and help link it to the main Kuru basin, making some sort of lateral correlative. As of yet, this hasn't really been pulled to its extended to its ultimate outcome, I guess I should say. So it's still being worked on, although I don't really know of any work that has subsequently followed Darlington's work in terms of new exploration or any new discoveries. So if anyone from the ESI is listening in, maybe they could fill us in on how this has progressed since the early 2000s. And in association with the Dynacaphalians, probably less exciting, are a lot of freshwater bivalves and gastropods. And while this may not seem as interesting as perhaps the vertebrate remains, their importance was reflected by Molyneux. So going back to the early 1900s again, he actually first recognized and developed the idea that freshwater bivalves that were found could contribute to the understanding of not only the paleo-environmental conditions, but the paleo-ecological conditions surrounding these animals. And this was something quite novel for the early 1900s and was only subsequently later developed in the 1950s by Bond, looking at how they could inform paleo-environmental and paleoecological associations. And the example I've given here is of the freshwater gastropod Hydrobia. This was discovered in the Meduma-Bisa mudstone formation. It's quite rare. It's not previously recognized in pre-Mesozoic rocks, and they represent the only Upper Permian representative of otherwise a modern genus Hydrobia. So some unique things that do come from the Meduma-Bisa mudstone formation that could inform the broader paleoecological and paleo-environmental settings of that formation that still need to be developed and studied going forward. And then last but not least, from the Lower Karoo group and from the Meduma-Bisa mudstone formation are cockroaches. There's the record of a cockroach wing, and it is Rhodesiomylarchus bondi, the species name named for Professor Geoffrey Bond. And the reason I cherry-picked and made a slide specifically for this particular fossil was because of its association with Professor Bond. Bond, as you know, made significant contributions to Karoo sedimentology and paleontology, as well as Karoo, post-Karoo and pre-Karoo geology and paleo. He was ubiquitous. He was instrumental in setting up the geology department at the University of Zimbabwe. He was involved in a wide range of geological endeavors. And I've been told that the naming of this cockroach after him was something of a career highlight and something he was particularly proud of. And I think that just speaks oodles of his personality and his love of all things paleo in Zimbabwe. Okay, and that kind of wraps up the very roller coaster ride of a highlight reel from the Lower Karoo group's 120 years of paleo that we know up to 2021. And to wrap up the Lower Karoo group, I've put up this illustration by Maggie Newman. It's depicting the main Karoo basin, but a lot of these elements are picked up in the Upper Meduma-Bisa mudstone formation. And we see a lot of the faunal and floral representatives in the Upper Permian, Lower Triassic of Zimbabwe. So we leave the scene looking like this. We then have a bit of an unconformity in time. We're not between the Lower Karoo group and the Upper Karoo group, and then bam, we enter this Upper Karoo group Triassic Jurassic wonderland. And the Upper Karoo group, again, this is a lovely illustration by Maggie Newman of some of the floral and faunal aspects of the Upper Karoo group in Zimbabwe, as is also present in South Africa. Just going back. So the Upper Karoo group is broadly equivalent, as I said, with the uppermost Beaufort, Stormberg, and Drakensberg groups. And between the two basins, we have different nomenclature for the Upper Karoo group, as is sort of the general case, because even though they're lithologically similar in the different basins, different people have worked in them and given them assigned different names to different units. Anyway, so the Triassic-Jurassic Upper Karoo group is exposed in several basins, so ranging from in the north there, the Kubura-Bassa Basin, Mana Pools Basin, to the very large Mid-Zambezi Basin in the northwest, and then down to the Tuli Basin. And I've plotted on Google Earth all the points where there have been fossil discoveries and fossil localities. And the Upper Karoo group includes quite a thick succession of terrestrial sediments with really high paleontological potential. The Upper Karoo group sedimentary successions preserved are all in these adjacent but geographically separate basins, but they all, as I said, show very similar lithological characters and are believed to be broadly equivalent with the similar Triassic-Jurassic sequences in the main Karoo basin. Even though all of these...
Why don't you just put some absolute numbers on those breaks? You know, some of us aren't that familiar with it, you know, the 200 or the 120 and whatever ages. Sorry to butt in.
No problem. Do you mean in terms of the age range that it's reflecting, the Upper Karoo group?
Yeah. So what age was that?
It's a very good question. Broadly, it's probably around 230 million years. The lowermost part of the upper Kru groups, the Chete Angwe formations, are probably around 230 million years. And then you go up into the Pebbly archos formation, which is Norian. I'm going to say uppermost age of Norian. And then you enter the forest and Batoka basalts, which are early Jurassic in age. So we're looking at between 230 million years and about 183 million years of time encapsulated by the upper Kru group. That helps.
Perfect.
Cool. Okay, so the upper group succession, where was I? So even though all of the units are quite fossiliferous and we find fossils in the various basins, it's really hard to try and do any interbasinal correlations. So they're lithologically similar, so you could kind of correlate it on lithological grounds, but that's very dodgy. And so we're looking for comparable fossil occurrences in all these separate basins, and they generally lack overlapping or index taxa that can be used to correlate all the upper Kru group sediments in the various basins. And so far, we don't really have any radiometric dates coming from the various basins. Obviously, the Batoka basalts have been dated, so they're between 179, 180, 185 in the Tuli Basin. And then we have one detrital zircon, so a maximum depositional age from the Pebbly archos formation in the Mid-Zambezi Basin that gives it an age of about 209 million years, so about Norian. So we've covered the sedimentology, and now we're going to have a look at the highlight reel from the upper Kru group in Zimbabwe and look at some of the really interesting and I found personally interesting fossil occurrences. And so the highlight reel from the upper Kru group, we have to, of course, start with the geologically oldest unit in the upper Kru group. So this is the Anglo-Sandstone formation or the Chete formation. These are these Molyneux-like equivalents, so Carnian in age approximately, if not a little bit older, we're not sure. And the first example I've given is from the Anglo-Sandstone formation from the Coprolite Basin. It hosts Molyneux-like dichrydium floral assemblages. And in particular, in the Coprolite Basin, there is one site that is somewhat unique for its fossil floras. The site was discovered by geologists while prospecting in the Coprolite Basin for uranium. They found this Coeli-Piti interval in the Manyema River. And then Tim Broderick went back, reassessed in the early 80s, and first really recognized the importance and significance of the Manyema peat deposit. And then subsequently, the collected material was described in the early 2000s by Barale, and that is in the Paleontologia Africana, so everyone can freely access it and have a look at the pictures, which I've just included a snapshot here, and it shows these really amazing Molyneux equivalent assemblages that have been previously described from Zim, but it is less diverse. So the Manyema peat deposit really is less diverse, but what it lacks in that diversity, as you can see from the illustrations, it really makes up for in its preservational quality, which is quite remarkable. The material is composed of really flexible cuticles that look like they could jump back to life despite 230 odd million years having passed. So to kick off the upper Kru group, we have to really acknowledge the fossil floras, and in particular these wonderful Molyneux-like floras and their remarkable preservation. And overlying all the Molyneux-like dichrydium-bearing units, so the Angwa and the Chete formation, we have what is known as the Pebbly archos formation in the upper Kru group. This is well known for its abundant silicified wood and some scarce lungfish tooth plates that were found around Lake Kariba in the Mid-Zambezi Basin, and also in the early 90s, some rhynchosaurs that were found in the Coprolite Basin. So recent work that I've been really lucky to be a part of has gone into the Mid-Zambezi Basin and looked at the Pebbly archos formation in particular, and we've looked at some old sites, rediscovered some new sites, and described several new fossil-bearing localities. And the picture on your left-hand side of your screen, the left-hand side shows some of the new localities that we've found with the Evolutionary Studies Institute, with Tim Broderick, with Darlington Mnyikwa, and Mike Sonder, and Paul Barrett from the Natural History Museum in London. And we've been really fortunate to work closely with Steve Edwards from Masango Safari Lodge, exploring all of these various sites along the southern coastline of Lake Kariba. And so in so doing, we've found some new aquatic and terrestrial fauna that have been recovered from the Pebbly Archos Formation. And these range from phytosaurs, which are first from Southern Africa, and some of the phytosaur snout material is shown in the bottom, your bottom right there, to a diverse array of lungfish tooth plates, to other terrestrial elements, such as non-dinosaurian archosaurs. So from really being unfossiliferous Pebbly Archos unit in the mid-Zambezi Basin to becoming this blossoming, diverse ecosystem. And actually, the new material that's been found and the co-occurrence with the fossil wood that we've seen really makes quite a unique record of late Triassic life in Gondwana that hasn't really previously been discovered or described from the main Karoo Basin or any other of the Karoo Basins in Southern Africa. And this truly makes a Gondwanan equivalent of what is typically seen in North American biomes during the late Triassic, such as those from the Chinle Formation. So we're getting some sort of equivalency in that sense. And much of the work in the mid-Zambezi Basin in recent years, and at least for the last 20 years, has been off of the back of Steve Edwards, who you see front and center there. He works as a ranger on Masango Island, and he runs Masango Safari Lodge. Really, he's a pioneering spirit, collecting and curating and generating a lot of interest for the outcrops along Lake Kariba and finding a lot of the material that has then brought in researchers to come and explore some of the sites that he's found, some of the material he's then collected, and then do more exploration on our own terms. And in 2017, when they had record low lake levels, that's what happened. A team led by the ESI, Jonas Ronier, went out and checked a lot of Steve Edwards sites, and they found more phytosaur material, so jaws, teeth, armor plates of the phytosaurs, more lungfish material, and such a diversity that there's obviously a diversity of lungfish, ancient amphibians known as Megapnosaurus, and a suite of other material that is still being prepped today. So we've had two field expeditions to the Lake Kariba, and yeah, it's really generating a bigger picture of the freshwater environment that we don't see in any other Karoo Age basins at this time. Not to be outdone, so from the Cobora Bassa Basin, we have a unit also designated the Pebbly Archos Formation. And now in the Cobora Bassa, I already mentioned those magnificent Mayinma peat deposits in the underlying Angua Sandstone Formation, but it also contains vertebrates from the Pebbly Archos, and it contains a wealth of vertebrates. And although as of yet, they haven't found any phytosaurs, so fingers crossed, that would be cool. And work that's been happening in the Cobora Bassa's Lower Pebbly Archos Formation has stemmed off the back of work that Mike Rath started in the 70s, and work that he's published, such as the rhynchosaurs that were published in 1992, and index taxa for the Carnian in the Lower Pebbly Archos Formation in the Cobora Bassa Basin, and subsequent work by Chris Griffin and colleagues. So Chris is you can see him on the far right there. He's a PhD student from the US. He's initiated several field explorations into the Cobora Bassa Basin, and him and the team that he's worked with have been collecting and building on the work that Rath had done from the 70s. And they've found a whole suite of more of, I think, rhynchosaur material. They've also found cynodonts, which is completely unheard of so far in Zim, which makes a lovely correlative with the main Karoo Basin and also globally. And the post on the right-hand side kind of alludes to some more exciting stuff that he and the team have found relating to early dinosauromorphs. So there's been a lot more in recent years generation of interest and exploration in the mid-Zambezi Basin and in the Cobora Bassa Basin for its sort of Triassic, Jurassic fossils. So stay tuned. I hear that publications are coming out shortly for the work that Chris has been doing in the Cobora Bassa. And then finally, we're slowly creeping up in the stratigraphy, and we're entering into the early Jurassic with the Forest Sandstone Formation. And I can't not bring up in the Forest Sandstone Formation two fossil occurrences, well, actually 3 fossil occurrences, but 2 that are help link to the main Crewe Basin. So this is the wonderfully ubiquitous Massospondylus, and you see Sentinel Ranch specimen on the right-hand side there in situ. You can go and view it on the farm. And we also have occurrences of crocodilomorphs, early Jurassic crocodilomorphs from the early Jurassic forest sandstone formation. So the forest sandstone is sort of broadly equivalent with the Elliott and Clarence formations in the main Crewe Basin. And then from the forest sandstone formation, the most important thing, I think, the most important take-home cherry-picked fossil is Megapnosaurus or Syntarsus rhodesiensis. It's a very small theropod, and I've made a single slide to showcase these wonderful critters just because of the sheer volume of remains that have been found from the mid-Zambezi Basin and also the Cabora-Bassa basins of these animals. And my graph PhD was based on material that was recovered of these animals from 3 different localities. The first locality was found in the early 60s by school kids from Northleigh School in Nyamaglovu on South Coast Farm. And then, so that's the type locality from which the type specimen comes. And then subsequently, Mike Rath found outcrop near the Mora River of the forest sandstone that bears Syntarsus or Megapnosaurus remains that are with sauropods in a fossiliferous sort of bone bed. And then finally, they have the Shiitake River bone bed deposit in the forest sandstone. That's really something quite unique. It's a very small lenticular bed that has hosted a dense bone bed of now up to about 40 individuals of this very small theropod. So in the 70s, Mike first described individuals from the Shiitake bone bed, and I don't have a picture here for it, and Tim kindly lent me those bottom 2 slides. But in the 70s, I think in the early 70s, that the bone bed was first, material from the bone bed was first recovered, and that hosted about 26 individuals. And then in the mid-80s, Mike Rath went back and they reassessed the site and they couldn't see any bone. And then when a field trip was done there in 2007 with Eric Roberts, they revisited the site and found that with a bit of time and erosion, the bone bed was now being exposed again, and that material has subsequently been collected and is still being prepared. And those individuals sometimes are semi-articulated, really unique and interesting from a taphonomic point of view, and also just for the sheer volume of individuals found in one layer. And I think in Mike Rath's thesis even points out that there's a dominance of females, or there's some sexual dimorphism, and it looks like there's a dominance of females in this particular group. So that bone bed is something that just keeps on giving, and we even have a little sneaky picture on the left-hand side of some Triassic tridactyl theropod tracks that could be related back to this Megapnosaurus rhodesiensis. And to end off this long journey, thanks for bearing with me, we finally reach the pinnacle of Upper Karoo Group and Karoo Aged Basin paleo with the discovery of Volcanidon caribensis in the forest sandstone formation. So Volcanidon was found purely by chance, and actually it's somewhat interesting how Volcanidon was discovered, because it's found in the mid-Zambezi Basin, and it is purely a function of the building and filling of Lake Kariba. So as you know, Lake Kariba is the biggest man-made lake in the world, and it was built in the late 50s, early 60s, and subsequently filled, even though a lot of the outcrop in the mid-Zambezi Basin that filled this valley was lost. It generated a lot of exposures. So prior to the lake filling, the mid-Zambezi Valley and this area in particular near Kariba was really inaccessible. It was had extremely poor exposures. There's a lot of vegetation, tsetse flies, heat. It was just a disaster for looking for fossils. But with filling of the basin, which even though it made technically a lot less accessible, the wave action along the shoreline produced a lot more continuous exposures, denuded a lot of the shoreline, and in so doing, it gives us a lot of the fossils that we're seeing and that we were privileged to experience in with Steve Edwards. And along that same line, the remains of Volcanidon were exposed on a cliff face on one of the islands in the lake. And actually a fisherman, Alec Gibson, discovered the bones, and he notified Mike Rath, who then went out and collected the material that was eroding from this new wave cut cliff on Island 126, 127 on Lake Kariba. So during excavation, Mike Rath managed to extract a sacrum, pelvis, the hind leg and foot, some tail vertebra, and some of the right forearm, and even some teeth that were found over the pelvis. And some of the material was even in articulation. And at that time, the specimen was considered to be sandwiched between two of the Batoka lava flows. So earliest Jurassic lava flows coming in, this animal was living between those lava flows in an interbedded sandstone. But actually, when the site was revisited in 2017 with really record low lake levels, they were able to look at the type locality and make the assessment that actually that basal sauropod, which is incredibly unique, was not found in the overlying Batoka basalt or interbedded within the overlying basalt, but within the underlying forest sandstone formation. So it made it much older than previously considered. So we have a basal sauropod in the upper Karoo group that kind of caps our 120-year journey through, cherry-picked journey through Karoo paleo in the Karoo Age Basins before we get the outpouring of the basalts that sort of stop sedimentation. And that said, and to kind of end the presentation, and I leave you with this quote from Prof. Bond that he gave as a presidential address to the Geological Society of South Africa in 1971. He said, "The past 70 years have slowly and painfully shown that Zimbabwe does not really lack fossils, but has a shortage of paleontologists has been the inhibiting factor." And now that we can look back on his quote, there's still a shortage of paleontologists on the ground, but there has been increased since the early 2000s, increased collaboration with international and South African paleontologists, and both within scientists and within the community, to keep pave the way for a brighter paleo future in Zim. And with that, I just say a big thank you, and thanks for listening and bearing with me through this crazy rundown of Zim paleo history over 120 years in the Karoo Age Basins. Thanks.
Fantastic, thanks, Lara. There's lots to discuss, so let us.
It obviously didn't start at 11. They finished already.
And share your screen, and then we can get the questions and discussion.
Roland,
Stop my video. Okay.
Roland, we can hear you and Jenny.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. It seems I arrived late, and my apologies for that.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, the presentation will be on YouTube by Monday, so you can pick that up. With the link.
Wonderful. I'll certainly do that. Thank you.
You can listen to me nattering away again.
No, it sounds well, with a voice like that, it's certainly worth listening to.
Oh, that's very kind. Thanks.
Yes,
Lara, where do you actually live?
At the moment, I live in Switzerland. I'm in Pornsby. It's a very small town in the northwest of Switzerland, in the Jura canton.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm
very
a vicarious mountain climber. I watch from my armchair while these guys slave up mountains and fall off of them. That's lovely. And prior to that, you were in Zim.
Well, I'm from Zimbabwe. Yes, originally I'm Zimbabwean, but I've spent most of my academic life in South Africa. It's only this year that I've transferred to Switzerland. So I kind of ran out of postdoc time in South Africa, and I was looking for jobs, and I was struggling to find a job that spoke to me in South Africa, and I managed to score a job in Switzerland. So I'm very fortunate.
Oh, wonderful. Which city are you in?
Lara, do you want to unshare your screen, and then we'll broaden up the discussion?
Oh, okay, sure.
I beg your pardon.
Screen sharing. That's okay. Is it stopped?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Right.
good. Okay.
Questions? Okay, so my
Oh,
question.
John H.
John H has got his hand up.
Yeah.
Show us your. Have you got a mic, John? Just get yourself audible.
Oh,
We can't-
Rosemary, thank you for your message. Sorry, I'm just in the chat now quickly while John's getting his mic. I would have loved to have met Jeffrey Bond. He sounded like an amazing personality. And Tim shared with me some of his verses. He wrote limericks or yeah, he just sounded like a lovely personality. And I have that 73 publication that you co-authored with him, and it's really, yeah, exceptional work on all the pollen. Sorry, hi John.
Lara, hi, John Hancock.
Hi John.
Hi, two questions if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One would be the mid-Triassic unconformity. As you know, I'm quite interested in it. What your take on it is. I didn't quite get the magnitude when you were giving the dates, but obviously it's of considerable magnitude, and maybe your thoughts on its formation. And then secondly, the coprolites. Is anybody looking at the coprolites for microvertebrates? Because we're having quite a lot of luck down here with micro CT on them, and hopefully some getting them under the synchrotron next year. We've got Jonah and I have a master student who's working on coprolites from the early Triassic, so it'd be quite interesting to see.
Coprolites are just some sort of magical wonderland. I don't know if you saw a recent paper that was published on, I can't remember the age of the coprolites, but it hosts, I think they're also mid-Triassic, that host a variety of beetles in them that look almost like they could jump back to life.
Yep, we have as well now from the early Triassic. So almost that's the Quanstorm paper you're talking about. So
yes.
I had them under the synchrotron. Yeah. So Chandelay's got beetles as well from the early Triassic. So yeah.
Oh, amazing. Oh, I look forward to that publication. But to answer your questions, so the unconformity, we don't know, to be honest. Microath estimated between 10 and 15 million years was lost between the lower Kuru group and the upper Kuru group. But we don't have a good handle on the lowermost age of the Chete Formation in the Mid-Zambezi Basin or of the Angwa Sandstone in the Coprolite Basin, where they have more fossil material. And I can't really speak for the Tule Basin. I'm not 100% sure in that basin. So we don't know, but it was estimated between 10 and 15 million years between the upper Maduma-Bisa Mudstone Formation and the Angwa Sandstone and the Chete formations in the Mid-Zambezi and Coprolite. But we just don't have a good grasp at the moment on the ages.
You're looking at possibly late Permian to late Triassic.
So in the Maduma-Bisa Mudstone, I think the maximum age they currently have is middle to late Permian, and then the first age that we have from the overlying the Chete formation is Carnian. So we actually have a lot of unknowns in that interval.
So it's the full the full mid-Triassic unconformity that we seem to see everywhere.
Yeah.
In sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, we don't have a good grip. We haven't been able to narrow it down in Zim at the moment. I think that's something for future work. I mean, it's a very intriguing question, and it's also a very interesting time in the terms of mammal-like reptiles and then early dinosaur forms and archosaur forms. So it's a pity that we don't know more about that interval and the overlying Angwa and Chete formations.
But it would seem you're missing the Permian-Triassic boundary there.
Yes, it seems so, yes.
It's a long unconformity. All right.
And John, can you get yourself on the screen? We'd like to see you.
Yeah, but you would. I wish I could, but I'm on a desktop and I don't actually have a camera, would you believe?
Great.
I
think Laura knows what I look like, though.
Yeah. And regarding the coprolites, I don't know anyone who's currently working on the coprolites. From Zim. I heard that there were some, but I don't know anyone who's currently working on any.
I saw you mention on one of your slides Coprolite Hill. Is that a specific place or a region?
Sorry, so I was just thinking of the older coprolites. There are some late Triassic coprolites, and those are still sitting with Jonah in the ESI. So I think they were collected. If they're not still with Jonah, then they might still be in the museum in Bulawayo, because they had some issues getting some of the material across the border from Zim to Joburg for preparation.
I think if they were with Jonah, he would have shown them to Chandelier, but
okay, then they must be still in the museum in Bulawayo.
He's in the field at the moment, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, then Kumecha.
Yeah.
Kumecha, sorry. Okay.
And you know, we have Andy Heckert down with us at the moment as well.
Oh, I didn't know. Okay, that's
he's on a Fulbright for 3 months with us. So
oh, brilliant!
It's quite useful having a phytosaur person.
That's excellent. Person. Yeah. Oh, I hope he can say more about all the material that's come from Zim. It's some of it's really encased in manganese and within this pedogenic nodule conglomerate, so it's very hard to extract, but some of the material that has been recovered is really nice. And even though people are probably less interested in the lungfish tooth plates, the diversity, the morphologies really speak to there being a large number and diversity of different types of lungfish. Which I would love to see lungfish burrows, but we didn't find any.
They're quite large by the look of it as well.
Yeah,
Those
some
are
of
fairly
them are
chunky
really
pieces.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's a lot of exciting stuff that still needs to be done, and hopefully there'll be more students and researchers who'll be interested in lending their expertise to looking at some of the material.
Hey, Lara, just another question. That black line on top of the red line on your cliff 126, 127, what happened then?
Black line onto the red line.
Well, I mean, you know, suddenly all of those animals and remarkable species and dinosaurs disappeared.
Oh, okay. So I'm trying to refresh my brain as to which line you mean.
That basalt flow overlying the.
Oh yeah, the basalt flow. Okay, so we have the forest sandstone, so it's probably early Jurassic in age, likely equivalent in parts with either the upper Elliott Formation or the Clarence Formation. So it really depends where you're at and what sedimentology you're looking at.
200, 205.
Yeah, so about 200 million years old approximately. And then, yeah, we have the flows that come through on that are exposed in the Mid-Zambezi Basin and around Lake Kariba. And those Batoka basalt flows kind of cap the sedimentation in that region. Although there are interbeds and there are even pillar lavas within the flows to indicate that there were standing bodies of water at that time, that there was some fluvial input during the extrusion of the basalt. So it wasn't just a dead environment. And I'm sure if you search the interbed, there'll be fossils or plants that can be recovered from those interbeds. If not trackways, I'd love to find trackways.
And the overall extinction, I mean, you guys are paleontologists, you know, there's relevance to climate change and the debate and the money that's being spent at the moment on so-called climate change.
Yeah, so, I mean, at the moment in the Karoo Age Basins in Zim, the Triassic-Jurassic boundary isn't very well developed. We don't, in terms of the faunal aspect, we haven't got good enough faunal records across that boundary, and we can't even really pinpoint the boundary in the main Karoo Basin, let alone in the Zim basins. So we're still trying to piece that together. But that, the basalts coming out, that is sort of Plensbachian, associated with Plensbachian climate change. And yeah, I can't say too much more on it because I really don't, I haven't really researched into that aspect of the basalts, but they are linked to sort of, at least on a localized level, climate change associated with the eruptions, which makes sense because if you're having a lot of lava extruded, you're going to have a lot of various gases that will influence at least the climate locally, if not within the Southern Hemisphere.
But I mean, it was a pretty quick and swift change and extinction overall.
The Triassic-Jurassic boundary, yes, but it's debated, is there even an extinction? So that's a whole other can of worms to open on another day. So I mean, in South Africa, there seems to be a general faunal change, and that we see different types of species, and also like the sizes of animals change across that transition, but globally there's a lot of doubters as to whether there is such a significant change across the Intriassic extinction or the Intriassic boundary.
Thank you. Nelia has got a hand up. You can unmute yourself, Nelia.
Hi, Nelia.
There we go.
Hi, Lara. How are you?
Good, thanks, and you?
Thank you very much for a fantastic and very educational presentation. As you saw in my chat, some of us thought when we were studying that there wasn't interest in paleontology in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, I mean, it is mainly igneous and metamorphic rocks. I will give it that. I think most of the country is igneous.
Even though I did my undergrad in the UK, where fossils was like the major undergrad thing that happened in field trips. When I went back to Zim, I said, okay, I just have to do metamorphic and igneous petrology. But I think you're educating us differently. I think, and just a couple of anecdotes before I actually make the comment that I want to make is one, is coprolite fossilized species?
Yes.
Okay.
100%, yeah.
I remember that always used to bring giggles in the class when our paleontology lecturer said that. Okay, and secondly, just while you were presenting on, I think it was the... Say it again?
I said, why are you being so polite?
I won't be rude, even though I'm a geologist. The other thing that I wanted, that actually just came back to my mind, and I actually didn't realize it might have been a kind of something in the back of my psyche that actually made me a geologist. When I was very young, my father used to be a driver for hunters that used to go to the Zambezi Valley. And on one of his trips, I think I must have been at 5, he brought back a piece of fossilized wood. So we actually grew up with a piece of fossilized wood as a doorstopper in our house. At the time, I had no idea about geology and what it meant. And yeah, so really interesting. So that leads me to the question that I want to ask in the comment around lack of paleontologists that can actually do the work that needs to be done in Zimbabwe. Do you have any ideas? Do you know of anyone who might be wanting to put in place some programs, maybe to interest school kids in paleontology or to get some programs going? I know that UNESCO has all these educational things around geosciences and stuff. Are you aware of anything or something that people might actually be interested in actually starting up for them?
Yeah, I mean, that would be really worthwhile. And I think to get kids interested at a young age and to recognize the heritage that they have underneath their feet is something really important. That's not just from sort of the economic potential of the country, but from sort of our beginnings, our origins with fossils and with plant fossils. But I don't currently know anything. I don't know if anyone else can chip in who might know better, but I don't know anything on the ground that's happening at the moment. I only know Darlington and Mike, who are, who facilitate exploration in Zim and who work mainly in the Age Basin at the moment, exploring for fossils, but I don't know if they have any side projects that is involved with sort of a more outreach perspective for children to get involved with fossil work and field work. And I mean, it used to be, I think, a little bit, when I was reading, it used to be a little bit more prevalent that they had like Northeast School got involved with looking at fossils on farms, but since then I don't really know of anything, but I haven't been on the ground for so long that I can't really speak to it. Yeah. I think it's worthwhile. It would be wonderful. I would 100% contribute in any way I could if something were to get going on the ground, just because it means so much. Like as a kid, I would have personally loved that. I didn't know about our fossil heritage in Zim when I was living in Zim. I knew about all the igneous rocks and crystals and cave paintings and all the sort of more anthropological side of things, but the paleo aspects aren't, I guess, even around Bulawayo are not as developed when I was there as a kid. And I only learned what I could about fossils when I was young by just reading books from school. But yeah, it would be lovely to have more people pushing that direction. And then we could get more young people interested who might go to university and then pursue paleontology or an aspect of paleontology. But I guess, it's also to do with the economic times in Zim. I think you want to be in a more secure position, and igneous and metamorphic and exploration geology lends to that at this time. So, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it will get there.
Yeah. Thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Before we bring John Brister back, I just want to say I was very impressed with the metaphor you used when you said there were only 2 paleontologists. You said ahead lies a mammoth task, which is that's quite apt. John?
Yeah, for Darlington and Mike.
Yeah. Just going back to the comment of Nellie's and Lara's, we'll connect you to Wendy Taylor, who's here in the Cape. She's actually an American girl, and her husband, Phil Janney, is the head of department at UCT Geology. And she's doing some amazing work doing exactly that, educating young kids about, rocks and minerals and geology and fossils. And she, she's got a little puppet show that she takes out onto the Cape Flats. And I think you raise a point too that's, very close to my heart, that the actual amount of work we've done to highlight this remarkable profession, be it geology or paleontology or hydrogeology, we've really undersold our industry, and we need to address that, and we need to get kids involved in this remarkable profession. The great thing being, as you've shown today, it's all out there in the ground. It's not stuff that you actually have to go and set up a school necessarily, or make things. You can take people into the field and see real live geology or paleontology. And Wendy's just doing some most amazing stuff. And the other thing to realize is that there's a huge amount of wonderful information on YouTube, and Wendy would be able to sort of pass you on to links and places to find a lot of this information. So we'll send you her email, and she'd love to, I'm sure, talk to both of you and probably also watch this presentation as well.
Cool. Thank you very much, John. That would be wonderful. Hopefully,
Thank you, John.
It can inspire some people.
Okay.
Is that it? Oh, I thought I would be grilled. Thanks, everyone, for being so kind.
We're all in awe, and we didn't realize this little country. I mean, we knew it had amazing resources and amazing people. We didn't, fully understand how extensive the fossil record is as well.
Cool. Oh, hi, Tim. I can see you. Cool.
It's been a wonderful session. Thanks for your lucidity.
Well, Tim, actually, Tim ran through my presentation beforehand. I was very grateful for Tim's advice and also really insider knowledge. So thanks, Tim. I really appreciated it.
Great to see you. You might be interested in just seeing one of those coprolites, which is, I don't know if you can.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, is that one from around the lake?
Yeah, that's a Tashinga coprolite from.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, as you mentioned, they're very ferruginous and full of manganese.
I wonder, I don't know how well they would micro CT scan, given that they have all that manganese coating on the outside. Maybe synchrotron, I don't know. Anyway,
there are a few around. Yeah, you also mentioned the other reptiles in the Madumabisa. When we were with Chris Griffin, we managed to get to the Ome, the communal area south of Kariba, into the Madumabisa, and we found a myriad of encased dicynodont skulls, which are at the museum in Bulawayo. But there's something that somebody might pick up on. Also talking of Chris Griffin, I think he submitted his paper last week. So as you say, keep an eye out. Anyway, it's great to see you, and nice to be part of this presentation.
Where are you, Tim?
Sitting in Harare.
Okay. And still active, still doing research.
In Zimbabwe, you cannot retire.
Good.
So we still have to make a living and do a few extras on the sideline, like paleontology. Talking of the education thing, it was the museum does run an educational facility which does attract various school kids and so on, and paleontology from time to time does come up. There's also the reefer hunting group near Chirundu, which has during holidays they have school groups going through, and they get a very broad brush introduction to wildlife, etc., including paleontology. We at home here in Chizipiti in northern Harare, I've got, and we didn't go up into the upper Jurassic Dundee beds with Lara this time, but I know she's quite intrigued by our dinosaur footprints.
Very much so.
But we have a number of them as a cost in our garden, and we have crocodiles of schoolgirls from Chizipiti Junior and Chizipiti Senior and other schools coming here. So yeah, they are the bits and pieces of education. My daughter Lucy was at the footprints. Well, she was at the St. Tarsus site at Chitaki just a couple of weeks back, and confirms that the bones are re-exposed. They get erosion every year, and so there's certainly room for another expedition from Patrick O'Connor and crew. And then she guided some people to the footprints in Chawori on the Ntumbi River. And the exciting thing is that she's found another sauropod trackway, which includes a number of pretty big prints, and they're about 98 centimeters across.
Wow.
But whatever, and she hasn't shown me her photograph, but she's got baby footprints with them.
Oh, I'm so excited. When you told me, I was blown away. Well done, Lucy. How's it?
Very good. Yeah, I'm so busy. I have neglected to edit the pictures.
Yeah, we want to see the pictures. Send them.
Yeah, the little ones about like this, and there's a whole trackway.
Wow, that's very interesting.
And then they're also small tridactyl ones, and then there's a massive tridactyl one. I mean, it's the biggest one I've ever seen.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great news. That's really superb. Well done for finding them.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. I'm working on baby sauropod tracks from the late Jurassic at the moment. So I sent some pictures to Tim of what our ones look like. I'd be interested to see how they compare.
Yeah, they are quite weathered, but they definitely look like a trackway to me.
Oh, cool. That's wonderful. I'm so excited.
They're crossing, so there's all sorts of different sort of sauropod, quite big ones, but not as big as our other ones. So
yeah,
this is like 98 centimeters. Maybe they're like 70. I didn't have a tape measure with me.
Wow,
but yeah,
that's very cool.
They're all sorts of different ones crossing, so it's quite an exciting little platform.
I'm absolutely itching to be there and see it in person.
We'll get you home.
Yeah, well, it's going to be flipping hot now, so next year make a trip.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I have to apply for some money. Hopefully the Swiss government will send some cash my way.
We've got Nelia asking a hand up again.
Yeah, I just want to start by apologizing to Lara because I'm being educated. I don't have any intellectual questions to ask, but I think what I can thank you for is an opportunity for us to meet new and old friends, Tim Broderick specifically. Tim, I don't know if you remember me. I was Nelly Maravanyika way back when at the IMR at UZ, Institute of Mining Research. But if you don't remember me, you might definitely remember my husband, who was the reporter who wrote the article on spontaneous combustion way back then when you were a young geologist. I think it must have been like 1983 or something like that.
Well
Do
done.
you remember that?
Yes.
That guy is my husband, the journalist who wrote the article on you.
Thank you.
It's good to see you in good health.
Okay, Henny, we can start another service here. Hey, Henny, just linking people around the world for a fee.
Tell me, what is the preservation? Any damaging, any pillaging, any vandalism of the sites? What's happening out there?
Oh, Tim will have to answer that one. I don't know of any vandalism of any of the sites, either the fossil sites or the trackway sites, but Tim?
Generally, the sites are pretty safe. The trackways are in national parks, which is the most important preservation. The most danger to pillaging is the fossil wood locations. But generally, we keep the locations fairly silent.
Good. Yeah, no, it was interesting to also see that you mentioned Sentinel Ranch, Lara, which has a very strong Bristow connection, obviously.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, of course, yes. Sorry, with the name, yes. Actually, Tim's recently been there, so maybe he can fill us in a little bit more on what they've been doing on Sentinel.
Yeah, I visited there with Jonah and Darlington just 2 weeks back. What we were doing was we were actually setting up Mike Jondo for his master's degree through WITS on the Sentinel fossils, and they are. We've got lots of new locations and so on, and lots of exciting things that will no doubt come out of that one. So yeah, that is the focus at this time. And the Bristows are raring to go.
Great, good to hear. Okay, everyone happy? Lara, you need a better punchline there, and shit has uses as well too.
Yeah, that's true. We'll wait until something's done with it, though.
Okay. We want to know more about it, particularly its age.
Yeah, the age. Everyone wants to know the age of these things, and it's a never-ending quest.
Okay, anyone else? Thanks, everyone. Lara, that was most impressive, and thanks for all the discussion from the participants. I think we all learned a lot today. And again, just shows how resourceful both, physically and mentally Zimbabwe is. Thanks to you, thanks to the talk, thanks to all the discussion. Thanks, Henny, again for running the show. And we look forward to sort of carrying on with this fossil and paleontological debate with Bruce Rubidge next Friday. And then, as mentioned, and I'm sure Henny's going to say it, the talk will be on YouTube, on the GSSA YouTube website, probably by Monday, courtesy of the good work of Nolene Pauls.
Are we moving it to Friday, or are we doing it on Thursday?
No, next Thursday, sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't want Roland to come a day late or a day early this time.
Your pardon.
Okay, guys. Thank you very, very much, Lara.
Thank you, everyone. Hi, Darlington.
Is Darlington here too? Oh, yeah.
I just can't in my meeting. Just finished. I'm reading. I missed everything. Oh.
It's fine. It's fine. It's on YouTube.
Okay, that's great. I'm looking forward to get it on next week on Thursday.
Cool.
Yes, then you'll see all we had to say about you, Dr. Darlington.
Thank you.
Bye, Darlington.
Hey guys, take care.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.